What's up, everybody? So I wanted to make another video. I'm really excited about this one because it is kind of the point in my diet choices that I'm at right now. This video is going to be about the 80-10-10 diet by Douglas Graham versus the starch-based diet, the starch solution by Dr. John McDougall. And these two, if you watch on YouTube, there's a couple of different videos about them, comparing their diets, arguing, basically to sum up each of their points. Douglas Graham, is the author of the 80-10-10 diet, 80% carbohydrate, 10% protein, 10% fat. Those are the macros for his form of diet. And there's a lot of things that I think go well for this diet. The fact that when you look in nature and you look at fruits and vegetables, fruits a lot of time have those ratios inside them. They're 80% carb, 10% protein, 10% fat. And I think that's really interesting. Like if you've ever heard of like Fibonacci numbers, if you look at a pine cone, the Fibonacci numbers are actually in the pine cone. It's like a really interesting, where math applies to nature kind of thing. And I think it's interesting that in the 80-10-10 diet, a couple of those things apply to real life. And it's just interesting that they match up like that. But for the 80-10-10 diet, it's a whole food diet. Basically, you have nothing but raw fruits and vegetables. And that's pretty much the basis. You want to eat more, it's more fruit dominant than anything. And in relation to the McDougall diet, 80-10-10 diet, Douglas Graham, he says that you should stay away from starches. And he's pretty adamant about that. He said, stay away from starches. You want fruit the most, a little bit of vegetables. You don't want to add any salt to your diet. You want to keep fats really low. They eat maybe an avocado a week, handful of nuts a week. It's really low amount of fat, but high in carbohydrate and pretty low in protein. And the protein part of it, from what I've read is, nobody really argues on the protein. Both sides of the argument are pretty much like lower fat, lower protein, for McDougall and the 80-10-10 diet. But transitioning over to the McDougall diet, he, stresses that starch should really, potatoes, sweet potatoes, things like that. Starch should really be the cornerstone of your diet. And he's not as adamant about the anti-fruit as, Douglas Graham is about anti-starch. So he's kind of okay with fruit. He says you can put fruit and vegetable in your diet, but he kind of talks a little bit about how too much fruit can be too much sugar. So here you have one diet, raw, with fruits and vegetables. That's pretty much the whole diet. Very little salt, and they say to stay away from starch. And then you have the starch diet, which is all starch, or a lot of starch, a little bit of fruits, a little bit of vegetables, and it can be cooked diet, so McDougall, cooked, Graham, uncooked. And a lot of these, I've pointed out some similarities and differences between these diets, but something, I've watched a couple of these videos on YouTube, they compare the two diets, but what I don't think anybody's made a point of yet is the fact that Douglas Graham, he is, people call him a doctor and everything, but I heard online one time that he's actually like not a massage therapist, but something along those lines. Like he's not a true doctor, he's not he hasn't been to college, to get the same qualifications as Dr. McDougall. Dr. McDougall is I think he's the head of dietetics in America, something like that, some organization. He's the big head of it. And I think this just points out a really interesting and a really important fact in this argument. Douglas Graham, he does cite a lot of science in his book, and that's apparent. But I feel like a lot of his opinions and everything come more based on not strictly as scientific as, Dr. McDougall. And I think that's really a really big point, because a lot of meat eaters point out that they have all this science. They say, well, blah, blah, blah says that a vegan diet shouldn't work. But McDougall, what he's able to actually really do is I feel like he better utilizes science in his argument. He points out that, starch is like mankind's diet. It really is. He points out all this history that promotes why starch-based diet really is, the diet for human beings. And McDougall, the names are getting confusing. Doug Graham pretty much says the same thing. He says, you know, it's a species-related diet, but it seems like McDougall, again with the science, is really able to, you know, portray his opinion much more strongly. And I just feel like that's a really important part. You know, with the McDougall diet, you're really allowed to, you know, you're allowed fruits, you're allowed starch, you're allowed cooked and uncooked food. It's backed by science. You know, the guy who's promoting it is really, you know, he knows his stuff. He's obviously, if he's part of this board, he's got enough stuff to be that high in like academics and everything. He's got qualifications, blah, blah, blah. So he's got all this stuff going. And not to say that Douglas Graham's diet isn't, you know, does have science, it's raw food, blah, blah, blah. It's very healthy, but I feel like the McDougall diet just has more going for it. And this isn't to say that, you know, the 80-10-10 or the Starch diet isn't right for anybody, you know, because like if you're eating an 80-10-10 diet and you feel good, keep doing it. Keep doing it. If you're eating a starch-based diet and you feel good, keep doing it. But I don't want anybody to be limited, you know, say like, oh, well, I've been convinced that 80-10-10 is the way to go and starch is an evil. And I really don't believe that's true. So, you know, this applies to my own diet because I was struggling, you know, should I really go all raw? Should I consume some cooked food? And I feel like the McDougall diet, I've actually read the Starch Solution. I haven't read the 80-10-10 book, but I've heard its material, you know, talked about many times. But I really feel like the Starch Solution just has more pros going, you know? It's more, it just seems the validity in that diet is better illustrated, to my opinion. And yeah, I just wanted to make a video about that. So, you know, if you like this video, like, subscribe, definitely leave a comment, because comments about this video should be really interesting to me, and I'll probably do a follow-up video to it. So yeah, thanks everybody, have a good one. Yeah, bye-bye.